we all been trying to challenge and to put efforts toward making better futures for the Egyptians, and that's why we will not be like other political factions who just say that, oh, that is this the Muslim Brotherhood are coming, they're telling to the West, the Ikhwanophobia is coming, the Islamophobia is coming. So it's like, no, it's not like that. We will not be like them. We will just go forwards, and we will let people to know the meaning of democracy. We'll let them join us because we are in the middle. So, and let them understand that there is now another alternative that you can join, and that is what we are as a youth revolution people inside Egypt. We are trying to convince the Egyptian with.
Could I ask you, if we go back to Shadi, do you see the Islamists, is that the greatest threat, you would say, against, state building, democratization of Egypt, and well, not Tunisia in the same way, but would you say that, or are there others that are bigger?
I think there's a lot of alarmism in the West about Islamist groups, and I think that we have to start moving beyond that, and now is the time to do it, because whether we like it or not, they're going to be part of governments. And we can't control that. Ultimately, that's up to Egyptians, and the Brotherhood is there. So in a free election, they're going to be part of the system. And unfortunately, the West, for such a long time, has supported autocratic regimes, as we all know. Why? Because we were afraid of the alternative. We were worried that if there were free elections, Islamist groups would come to power. And unfortunately, this paralyzed Western policy for such a long time, and it put the US and its European allies, but probably not Sweden, on the wrong side of history. So now I think is the time, and what I think these uprisings, not just in Egypt and Tunisia, but all throughout the region, it really shows us that this is a new moment for the Middle East, and I really do think that this will ultimately be comparable to the fall of the Berlin Wall and the fall of the Iron Curtain. It's one of those historic moments. So the question is, will the West rise to the occasion? But to go back to your question, if it's not Islamists, what's the bigger threat to democracy in Egypt? There's always a potential for reversal, and I think we've already seen that in the Eastern European countries, where in Serbia, Ukraine, or Georgia, just a few years ago, you had the colored revolutions, and now we've seen a move back to some of the old practices of the old regimes and greater authoritarianism and so on. So there's always a risk that no matter who comes to power, whether it's liberals, leftists, or Islamists, power is attractive, and that corrupts whoever is there. So I don't think it's a matter of Islamists or anything else. We have to have strong constitutions and strong institutions in the Arab world so that power is constrained.
Stefan?
Yeah, I agree with Shadi. I think I'm not much to add. So.
No, but if we look at the threats, I mean, and you're
no, again, well, my sense is that in a way the brothers, and that's one of the points I was hoping to make, are also. I mean, when you go to the leadership, right? The brothers. We talk about the brothers as a whole. The brothers are, made of different factions. These factions have existed for a long time. Since the revolution, some of these factions have become more vocal, right? And you see that there's a generational split within the Brotherhood. You see that the old leadership, the Guidance Council, is certainly more, conservative and less committed to democracy, certainly, than the younger generation. Recently, for instance, there have been talks, and there have been, prominent member of the Brotherhood gave his resignation a week ago. And in his resignation letter, he said, I'm resigning from the Brotherhood because I've heard that in the middle of the revolution, some of the leaders of the Brotherhood went to see General Omar Suleiman, who's the head of the Mukhabarat, who's the head of the intelligence, and they went to discuss with him, saying, well, we are ready to withdraw support from the revolution if, in exchange, you allow us to form a political party and to have, a bigger share in a system that remains a Mubarak system. It's unconfirmed, right? I take Haitham Abu Khalil, I take his word for it. If that is the case, that means that, among the older generation in the Brotherhood, you have people who are not ideologically committed to democracy. So for them, an authoritarian system that gives them more space for preaching, more space for da'wah, which in the end is fundamentally, at the beginning at least, the mission of the Brotherhood, then certainly some of them would be content with it. So it's not about imagining people who would radicals in a sense that it's not Iran. Iran is gone, right? 1979 is gone. It's whether people are committed to democracy in the sense that they're going to play by the rules of a democratic game, which means that they may lose, and are they ready to lose? Or would some of them be content with a system that remains quite authoritarian but would give them a bigger share? And I think this debate is going on within the Brotherhood itself. Again, that probably would be a fear that I would express, but more in that direction.
Yeah, and we're focusing a bit about Egypt, but Tunisia, do we see the same type of threats?
Well, my sense is that in Tunisia, Slim would probably be able to comment on this, but my sense is that the Tunisian Islamists are less of a political force than the Egyptian Islamists. They're not as strong on the ground. They're not as strong also because they were hit very, very, very strongly, right? The repression against Islamists in Egypt has been fierce. It has been even fiercer in Tunisia, which means that today Ennahda has basically, not much left of what of the networks it had 20 years ago, right? On the ground, people who know Tunisia better than me argue that if there are free elections tomorrow, if Ennahda got 20%, that's probably the most they would get. I don't know what Slim would say about that.
Please comment.
Yeah, I agree with Stéphane. What's interesting in the Tunisian situation is that we found out after the revolution, that Islamist group did not participate into the revolution, contrary to to Egypt, because simply they were outside Tunisia and they were not. They don't have any roots in Tunisia. They have been crushed by the Ben Ali regime. So what's interesting is that everybody is starting at the same line in Tunisia. Islamist, non-Islamist, every group, every party is starting at the same line. So we discovered this because even we in Tunisia thought that there is an Islamist menace. And some of the good surprises of this revolution is that we too discovered that there is no Islamist menace in Tunisia.
No strong force.
So they are really well organized. They're working very well, but it's fair. They are starting like everybody else at the same moment, and now there will be election which will, and the best will win.
And if we talk a bit about the transition, sort of, how stable would you say that the system, for example, in Egypt, is for this transition? Will it stand or will it just evaporate?
Well, Egypt isn't starting from scratch. I mean, Egypt is coming with a set of institutions. Yes, they're not the best institutions. Yes, they have problems, but there is something there. There is a political structure. There was a parliament that, while relatively weak and subservient to the regime, did have an opposition presence. You do have a somewhat independent judiciary, even under the Mubarak regime, that would every now and then reassert its independence. You have professional syndicates that, again, played an oppositional role in recent years. So there is something there. And Egypt, as we know, has one of the more vibrant civil societies with thousands of organizations. Yes, they're small. Yes, they're not always terribly effective. But again, it's not like a Libya situation where there was absolutely no political life whatsoever, and you literally have to start from the very basics. Tunisia is sort of in the middle of that, where Tunisia did have something, but again, as I think Salim was suggesting here, everyone is starting at the same start line because everyone was equally repressed under Ben Ali. In terms of, so I think Egypt in that respect is promising. And I think a very key question is, what is the role of the military going to be after it transfers power to civilian rule? And that's most likely going to happen by September. So what is the role of the military going to be after that? Are they going to totally remove themselves from politics, or are they going to try to play an influential behind-the-scenes role similar to Turkey? And some people might see that as a good model, but the military in Turkey for many years caused a lot of problems because they would overthrow governments when those governments weren't doing what it thought was appropriate. So, I mean, there are different models for the role of the military, and that's going to be a really crucial determining factor as Egypt moves forward.
We've got a question from the audience. Johannes Moskin, who is a student in political science. A little where? There, yes. So he asks, you're talking about before that it's much more easy to destroy a system or a dictatorship than it is to rebuild a democratic community. Do you think that the Tunisian and the Egyptian, if we start with the Egyptians, the people that they have the patience enough to rebuild this, and even though they have like very difficult economic situations and such? What's your comment on that, Mustafa?
في مصر في اتجاهين. الاتجاه الأول هو الاتجاه المهتم بالإصلاحات السياسية، وده هو القوى المدنية والتيارات السياسية. لكن القطاع الأكبر المطالب الاقتصادية والاجتماعية أكثر إلحاحا وطلبا عنده من المطالب السياسية. عندنا مخاوف حقيقية إن تدهور الوضع الاقتصادي ربما يعني يحدث ثورة مضادة تجاه التحول الديمقراطي، ولذلك يعني نحاول أن نركز على الجانب الاقتصادي، لأن الناس في مصر ترى أن الثورة، عدد كبير من الناس يعني خاصة الفقراء، يرى أن الثورة قد أضرته بشكل اقتصادي، ولكن أعتقد أن يعني ما زال أمامنا عدد من الشهور ممكن أن يحتملها المصريين حتى يتم التحول الديمقراطي.
There's two ways in Egypt to comment on. First, there is the political reforming, and the second, it's the economic reforming. And that is the two things that Egyptians are focusing to, from their demands to the governments and to in the new elections. So first, political reforming, which lead by the society and the political factions and everybody who's educated. But the second, that's hard to say, it's bigger, but which is the people who's looking for economic. Because there is the economic situation after destroying the last system start to be down and down. So we're having fears and we're having worries about what will be going on. We are afraid from the power of these poor people that maybe they will just turn off or they will just get fed up with what's going on. But in the meantime, we still have some months that we just to wait September's the elections to come, and I'm sure that it will be a month that poor people can wait and that they can give it to Egypt to start a new Egypt.
Salim, any comment? Tunis, the people?
I'll maybe add, because it's the same situation in Tunisia as in Egypt, this backlash exists too for Tunisia. We're a little bit worried that people may, at some time, because we won't escape recession, unfortunately, due to this revolution. We're a bit worried that people may say it was better before, because of their situation will change.